I'm going to compare and contrast the consumer-oriented approach and the constructivist approach to evaluation. The consumer-oriented approach is organized around the needs of the consumer. This means the evaluators must think about what each person is looking for out of a product and then rank them. On the other hand, the constructivist approach focuses on all of the stakeholders and their different needs. This means that the constructivist approach focuses on understanding all stakeholders and their varied interests. The evaluator who uses the consumer-oriented approach focuses on evaluating products for consumers. We, the buyer, are the primary stakeholders, and they are looking out for our well-being. The constructivist approach acknowledges the varied interests of stakeholders and attempts to understand the needs of all people, regardless of how much power they may have. The constructivist approach seeks to help everyone involved understand each other and come to a consensus about the overall goal of the evaluation. In the consumer-oriented approach, the evaluator uses their understanding of what the consumer wants in order to create the evaluation questions. The constructivist, on the other hand, brings all stakeholders to the table, even those who are usually disenfranchised, and seeks questions from all of them. The consumer-oriented approach focuses on answering objectively which product is best. When answering this question, one should take into consideration all the different needs of the consumer. Unlike this approach, the constructivist has no set questions because there is no way of knowing ahead of time what the different stakeholders will need. In addition, constructivist evaluators understand the questions may change as the process progresses, and new questions could emerge at any time. The consumer-oriented approach focuses on being able to rank products based on a set criteria. The ranking should be meaningful to consumers and should allow consumers to know which product is the best. The consumer-oriented approach is objective in nature and uses the experimental method in order to assess products. Where the consumer-oriented approach is objective, the constructivist approach is open-ended and subjective and focuses on gathering the views, needs, and interests of all stakeholders in order to help ultimately come to a consensus concerning the program being evaluated. Stakeholders are active participants throughout the whole process. Michael Scriven is a known proponent for the consumer-oriented approach. However, Ralph Nader also approached evaluation in a similar fashion around the same time. Scriven, along with other individuals, have continued to refine the approach and continue to advocate for the well-being of consumers. Guba and Lincoln are the primary individuals who started the constructivist approach. They recognized that we cannot separate our personal biases from our needs and that these must be taken into consideration and made an active part of the evaluation process. The consumer-oriented approach focuses on helping consumers choose between different products. The evaluation focuses on making final judgments about the value of a product. This approach is not interested in proving products, but instead just ranking them. The constructivist approach takes a different view. And because of the high value put on individual stakeholders, this evaluation style only works when all people understand and agree with the subjective nature of and are willing to be active participants in the process. The consumer-oriented approach uses independent evaluators that approach the evaluation process using objective measures to comprehensively assess the worth or value of a product. Evaluators should have the consumers in mind and should be looking out for their well-being. Unlike this approach, the constructivist recognizes the subjective nature of humans and embraces the varied viewpoints of all stakeholders. This approach can lead to answers that are more likely to be implemented by stakeholders because they are part of the whole evaluation process and their issues and concerns were always at the forefront of the evaluation. Since consumer-oriented evaluators are independent of companies and stakeholders, the evaluator must make the judgment on what is important and how to evaluate the product. This can lead to evaluations that do not take into consideration aspects of the product that consumers care about. If this happens, the rankings may be meaningless. The constructivist approach solves some of these problems, but has issues of its own. First, the subjective nature of the constructivist approach and its reliance on constant communication with all stakeholders means the evaluation is time-consuming and expensive. In addition, no real consensus may be reached, which can lead to no positive outcomes for the organization. Finally, even though they want to include all stakeholders, some people can and will be left out of the process. The consumer-oriented approach doesn't make sense for the RUPIS program. Parents aren't looking to evaluate other options. In addition, evaluators may not understand the needs of these individuals. Because of this, the constructivist approach makes the most sense. The constructivists will make sure that all interested parties are heard, and we can make sure that both mothers, staff, and administration have a say. The important in understanding how well the program is working and how to improve the program. A major concern, though, is the time and money issue. RUPAs may not have either of these resources available, and their grant funding agencies may be looking for a more cut and dry answer as to whether the program is beneficial or not.